Hi everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Today I want to talk about the topic how to get the most out of your job in 2025, okay, and beyond. And the reason why I want to talk about this stuff is because there are many people who are in jobs right now who are just coasting, who have quiet quit, who feel like they're in a state of despair and they feel like they can't move on, they can't transition. And so today, what I really want to do is give you some things to think about in order for you to be better prepared for any sort of transition or to get the most out of your current role. So, the first thing is use your job to build leverage, not just pay bills. I'm guilty of saying this, okay? Oh, you know what? I've just been in a job or whatever it may be to make the money and then obviously just pay into my business and make that grow and da 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 da. All of that kind of stuff is true. Of course, it's true. There's element of truth to that, but there has to be part of you in the job. There has to be. People can read your presence. People can sense your connectedness and your commitment to a certain role, and you can fake it for a bit, but the person you'd be kidding is yourself. And so I'm not saying you should force yourself to like it, but you have to think to yourself, how can you provide more leverage? Now, the thing that you should be doing is what can I learn from this space? Are there templates you can sort of like really sort of take on board? Are there systems that you really need to know and understand? Are there key insights that could be useful for the next role? Is there access to any types of people who can really sort of like allow you to get to the next step? So the point being made is you need to find a way to ethically, obviously, and legally extract the information that you need in order for you to move on. And I have to be very careful when I say this. I'm not saying steal information, but what I am saying is you have to find a way to extract the insights, the know-how, the systems, all of that kind of stuff there. Obviously, within contract and within your clause, because there are some firms or companies or whatever it may be that say you can't do X, Y, and Z within 6 months, whatever it may be. You can still be ready. What you do in your current role is a system, and if you want to stay within that space, that niche, that role, then you want to be able to extract that system and test to see whether you can create efficiencies in the next space, or even test to see if you can use that efficiency with a certain level of intention and consciousness in a current space that you're in right now. This is why it's important to have those different frameworks. Create them for yourself. Maybe align to a framework that is well known commercially, whatever it may be. So leverage insights through people, data, strategy, policy, templates, frameworks, methodologies, whatever it may be. Really, really sort of take that on board. The second thing is you want to get hyper clear on the value you add. So this comes back to what I was saying in a video yesterday, okay? And that is you want to be in a space of knowing how to track the results that you provide. So let's think about it, okay? Let's think about this very carefully. There is a strategy. A strategy is made up of a vision, okay? So the future you want to get to, the mission, the things that you say you do, the values, the things that the organization deems as important, and I guess the operating model, okay? So the approach that you take in order to, provide, to get the business working, okay? And there's going to be a certain level of analysis that is taken on board to really be clear about what is the unique approach that one should take in order to provide value for a group of people, stakeholders, investors, whatever it may be. Why do I say this stuff? Well, coming from that, you're going to have clear objectives, you're going to have deliverables, and you're going to have milestones that need to be achieved in context to you as a person, in context to your role. So if you understand the bigger picture, and if you know where you fit into that bigger picture, then you know how to provide value. And so this is where you start to track things and you're clear about, okay, what is my RACI on this? RACI stands for responsibilities, accountabilities, consulted and informed. Like, where do I fit? Do I need to be consulted on stuff? Do I have a responsibility on something? Do I need to be accountable for something? And that will tell you what your rhythm is and what the ad hoc projects you need to do in order to provide value. Stay with me here. The point I'm making is when you have a clear thread from the top in terms of the strategy down to the level of you, then you know what is valuable for the organization, and therefore you can track it. You track it in terms of numbers, quality metrics, percentages, money, experiences, comments, whatever it may be. You track this stuff, and then you package it in terms of your CV, your LinkedIn profile, your portfolio, your supporting statement, so that when it comes to finding a new role, it is super clear what value you provide. There's no confusion. There's no, because you've done the work. You've done the work. I speak about the PAR model, problem, action, result. It's a way for me to understand how I provide value based on the problems that I've solved. I did that for every single piece of work experience that I had. I went all the way back, so I understood exactly how I provided value. So that when it came to a role, it was just rolling off my tongue. I could talk about stuff. When I talk about now being a program management consultant, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm doing. Risk and issue management, governance setting, making sure that you're preparing for the board, coaching project managers on developing their project assets, whether that is PIDs or project briefs, how they sort of like operate their task and finish groups or working groups, whatever it may be. There's a whole bunch of stuff when it comes to even reporting. Okay, what does that specifically look like? So the point being made is that you need to put yourself in a position of understanding, okay, what value you provide based on your strategy, based on the bigger strategy, and how you articulate that information. The next thing I want to talk about is making yourself visible to the right people. This is a big one. So naturally, I was the sort of person who sort of like networked with people here and there. But when you're specific, intentional about the right type of people to sort of like network with, maybe this is a director, okay? Maybe this is an executive. Maybe this is a head of or a lead. Maybe this is somebody who is really influential and can put in a good word for you. You have to lay the land and understand who is the right person to go to. So that when it comes to sort of like different situations, you have an alliance. You have people who trust you and believe in you as a person because you've built that rapport relationship. It doesn't have to be that deep. That initial sort of like conversation could be like, hey, I've heard a lot about the brilliant work you've been doing, and I'd love to have a conversation with you to learn more about how you've taken an approach on X project or X, Y, and Z. You use that as an opportunity to get to know that person and get in there in terms of getting them to see that you're cool, you're a good person to talk to. Following up by saying, if I wanted to find more information or catch up with you again, would you be open to that? And they say, yeah, I would be open to it. That's how you start if you feel like you need to break the ice, as an example. Okay? So really sort of like connect with these different people and talk to them on a regular basis. I will never forget, there was a time, I think this was in 2015, okay, when I was sort of like trying to climb the ranks and all that kind of jazz there. I interviewed 4 different directors, and I interviewed them because I wanted to understand, and this was within the NHS, I wanted to understand how they got to that position. So invaluable, because it allowed me to learn some more insights, which I'll get to in terms of a separate point. So you want to get to that level. You also want to be in a situation where by making yourself visible, you're speaking up. And we've all done this. There's situations where it's like people are chatting, and you're just like, oh, I really want to talk, but you feel nervous to talk. You feel scared. You feel like you're going to be looked at because maybe demographically you're different from everyone else, or maybe you're junior, or maybe you just feel like people don't take you seriously, or you just feel nervous. I'm saying speak up. And if anyone makes you sound stupid, that's because they positioned you that way. It's not because you are. You're not a stupid person. So if someone tries to correct you, whatever, defend yourself in a very diplomatic but firm way. So if you say, no, I don't think it's actually like that. I think what was meant to be done is that X, Y, and Z was supposed to do X, Y, and Z. And they're like, oh yeah, that's obvious. And then you could be like, oh, well, no, it's not that obvious. The reason I'm saying this is because, like, don't let them just do what they're doing. Don't let them sort of like control you that way. Because people like to just push people. Nah, we're not doing that. So be confident in your speech. It's not about being rude. It's not about being a show off or anything like that. Just be factual in what you're saying and contribute, because people who contribute, no matter how small, are remembered. And you want to be remembered when there are opportunities. This is why I'm saying what I'm saying. Okay? Another way to be visible is maybe, depending on your role, you can develop some sort of weekly update for the team, okay, that you produce. Or you can send some sort of weekly updates to your line manager, okay, or lead, so they know what you've been doing, okay? So what have you done well? What do you need to improve on? What are your next steps? Simple. Bam, bam, bam. Nothing crazy. So they have an idea of what you're doing. Great little trick that you can do. And then that way, your line manager can either sort of pick up on some of those stuff, or they can be like, this person's in hand. They're sensible. They're keeping me in check. It's a neat way to do it. Okay. The way I do it is I typically just have a one-to-one with, let's say, another consultant or a contractor, or the end client on a weekly basis, just so they're clear about what deliverables need to be achieved for that week. It's a hard thing to do when you start off with, but it can be done, okay? Because some things are clearly immediate and other things are not as immediate. The other thing I want to say is reverse engineer your role inside out, okay? Reverse engineer your role. And I say your role, what I meant to say is your next role. So I had no business being a program management consultant, but again, I did the training and all that kind of stuff there, so very thankful for that stuff. But before then, I was really learning and understanding what is the criterion, the responsibilities, the sort of like frameworks required for me to be a good project and program manager. What does that look like? I told you I interviewed those directors. I was like, okay, how do I think more strategically? What does that look like within the workspace? It's different to operations. And I realized actually the more I work and deliver, the more I just become a go-to and become that operational project guy. I don't really become the guy who's strategic by nature. What is strategy? Strategy is the approach one takes, okay, based on providing unique value in a competitive way for your audience, investors, stakeholders, whatever it may be. Some may argue that it's not necessarily competitive, and there are pros and cons to that sort of like statement. But the point being made is it requires a different side of me. So how do I start giving myself the opportunity to provide a different side of myself so people can see that I'm working above grade? And it's not even because I want to get a promotion necessarily within a space. My mindset, I'm leaving anyway. So I need to position myself that in such a way where I can, it's always about evidence, my friends. It's always about evidence. And it's not just about evidence, it's about the articulation of the evidence and communicating that. This is why we do this stuff. We give ourselves a chance. We give ourselves an opportunity. Okay? So think about how you can reverse engineer your next role. And maybe you speak to someone. You connect with someone you know. You connect with someone on LinkedIn. You record the conversation. You ask key questions. These key questions can come from ChatGPT if you don't know what to say. You can let it flow. Whatever it may be, you have to be intentional about reverse engineering that next role. And of course, again, I'm saying this in every video, I'm trying to do this. So if you want to see, again, me in your inbox, okay, and you want to sort of like read more things centered around portfolio careers, contracting, all of the stuff that I talk about, then feel free to sign up to my newsletter and you can get more information centered around that stuff. All right, let's get back to it. So the next thing I want to talk about is prioritizing skills that are in demand. So you may have seen a video that I did. I think it was what the future job market looks like by 2030 or something like that. And so that was naturally centered around things like the AI revolution, strategic thinking. We've got automation fluency, stakeholder management, commercial acumen, all of this kind of stuff there. Like, how can you develop in these skills? I was reading a comment by someone who said that, oh, you can't just go onto Udemy and all that kind of stuff there. Of course you can't. That's not going to do enough. Sometimes the skills are heavily based on venturing out, okay? Venturing out to other teams. That's how I did it. Not everyone's going to do it the same way. So you have to kind of be creative based on what makes sense to you. Not be doom and gloom and saying, I give up, I can't do anything. There has to be a way. There has to be a way. And if there's no way, then your grind, my friend, is focusing on finding a new job, but making sure that you articulate your value a certain way. So for those individuals who can do it, then it's thinking about, okay, where can I get sort of like more experience? So for example, when I was what was I again? I was a commissioner. I was a commissioner for NHS England, working for the public health team. And commissioning involved sort of like doing a feasibility assessment. So really understanding what type of things need to sort of like be prioritized. Then determining what those priorities are, okay, and getting that approved. Then sort of like doing some sort of procurement to get people in, so services in to deliver that work, developing the contract, and performance managing those individuals so that they're hitting the targets based on what it is that you're aiming to do based on those initial aims from the feasibility. So what I did was I made sure it was kind of like I was kind of contracting internally as a permanent member of staff. I made sure I worked for every single different type of team. I worked for the contracts team. I worked for the project management side of things. I was more so in the public health side of things in terms of Public Health England as opposed to NHS England. I was trying to get my sort of like knowledge and know-how really up. I made sure I read something known as Section 7A, which is really breaking down what we're supposed to do, mandated by, the government, so to speak. And so all of this stuff gave me an edge. It's the edge that you need, but it also gave me the skills to understand how to better position myself when it comes to skill development and how I can utilize that moving forward. So you need to think in a smart way. How can you sort of like develop your skills, but more importantly, in demand skills, especially for 2025 and beyond. The other thing I want to say is, in order for you to sort of like really capitalize on your current workspace, build a strong personal brand. Build a strong brand. And again, this depends whether you sort of like go into the office or not. If you do, this is great because people seeing you, having coffee chats, having the meetings, running those meetings, being part of like, sort of like extracurricular groups at work, all of that stuff builds your brand. All of it does. Those individuals who write the blogs on the intranets and all that kind of stuff there, they get noticed, because they realize there's an opportunity inside the space of work as opposed to just outside where it's bigger and you can get drowned out much easier. So there is something to be said about being part of those groups, being heard, making sure that you are essentially sort of like getting yourself out there. The way I did it, okay, I was part of the coaching and mentoring sort of like scheme within the NHS. I was also a healthcare leadership 360 facilitator, which basically meant that the NHS had a proprietary sort of like leadership framework, and I would basically get people to fill out this assessment and I would coach them on the findings of that stuff. Okay, so I'll do this with different people across the NHS, across the UK, or England, should I say. I was also a graduate action learning set facilitator, which really meant that for 2 or 3 years, there were graduates who were coming into the training program of the NHS, and I would do action learning sets with them in order to develop their leadership skills over months or even 2 years or whatever it may be. So all of this stuff made me public. It boosted my brand because it didn't just mean that I was just doing the stuff for my job. I was also doing this extracurricular stuff that people were interested in as well. And of course, there were other sort of like side groups I was part of, all of that kind of jazz. So these are different things you can start thinking about. And I know there are opportunities you can think of, is whether you can be bothered. And dare I say it, there is value sometimes in going out for drinks. I was never one of those people who went out for drinks. And if I did, I would stay for half an hour. As long as I was seen. I'd stay for half an hour. Max, I stayed 1 hour one time. Ooh. But it's just being seen, okay? Because that's where growth and all of this other stuff may come into play, and may is a conditional tense, of course. The other thing is the ability to negotiate. I remember this one time. So negotiation is an interesting one. I'm not an expert within this space. I'm not going to say that, but I negotiate all the time when it comes to contracts or all of that kind of stuff there, because I know my worth. What do I mean by that? I know what the market rate goes for. I know what is acceptable in terms of the types of things that I do, and I've got goals to achieve. Do you get what I'm saying? So with that in mind, I can't be second guessing my stuff. And I know ladies typically find it difficult to negotiate at times, or they may not be ballsy. I fully get it. But you have to be clear about how you approach your negotiation skills. I had this conversation with somebody who's part of a group that I'm part of. And I basically said to them that you need to be clear about what you do in terms of your job description or whatever it may be, or an idea of your job description, whether you know what it is or not. Then you need to be able to articulate what value you've provided and how you've gone above and beyond, and go based on the marketplace and understand, okay, what sort of rates are going based on what I've been doing. What are other people charging? What are people charging when it comes to, the next role up, if you've been doing that as an example? And you evidence for how long you've been doing this additional stuff for, okay, or your commitment for, or whatever it may be. So you can use that in terms of firing power when it comes to negotiations. I remember one time when I was a contractor and I didn't even know it. And I became permanent because I was looking for a permanent role. This was before I started my contracting campaign. So this was back in 2015, near the end of 2015. And they were going to put me on a lower band. And I basically said to them, well, I've been doing this, I've been doing that. And secondly, this would be below the rate that I was achieving beforehand. So I can't accept lower than this. Just said it like that. And they put me up. That's not no one's going to have the same sort of like rhetoric or whatever it may be. And I'm not even saying this is amazing, because it's not. I just knew I didn't want to get paid less. I mean, it didn't make sense. Why would this be a new opportunity if I was getting paid less? That doesn't make sense. So you kind of have to defend yourself as well, And it's not just to make more money, but because, well, if you're not even getting market rate, what the hell? So really think about all of this kind of stuff, okay? The other thing I want to say is think portfolio career rather than full-time employment. Remember, portfolio career is a career that you create. It's not one that you pursue. And so thinking about that, you have to think about who you want to become as a person. What do you want to be known for? How do you want to be associated? So it's not just based on what you do. Let me say it this way. It's not just based on your role, okay? It's more so based on the holistic nature of you and how you involve yourself in different things. I'm not saying loads of things at one time and blah. No. I'm just saying, how do you basically provide value based on who you want to become as a person, based on the career that you are creating? And so this is where you need to basically try things. This is why I say connect with different stuff. Maybe you do mentorship or coaching or whatever it may be and help other individuals. Maybe you get that yourself, okay? So even though your job acts as an anchor, okay, as the central thing, or maybe the whale that brings in the most money for other opportunities, you have to be open to those other opportunities. You have to have the energy for it. You have to have the finances for it. You have to have the mind for it. So don't think I'm going to do this or this. Think I'm going to do this and this. But I'm only going to do this because it aligns with who I am as a person, who I'm trying to become, how I want to be associated. That's how you think of it. And that, my friends, is pretty much everything I can think of right now in terms of how to get the most out of your job this year and beyond. So hopefully that was helpful, man. If you want to see more things centered around portfolio careers, contracting, consulting, all of that kind of jazz, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.